What is a cold case, and why is it taking the TBI so long to release the results of Pauline Pusser's autopsy report? I'll try to explain that as best I can. I suspect that it's because the autopsy is only one part of the overall investigation, and they don't wish to release any information until they have the entire investigation completed. I also think that there's a possibility that the autopsy found new evidence that needs to be investigated. That would be another reason. If they haven't investigated it yet, they're not going to release the results of the autopsy. They have current cases that they have to work first. Cold cases are not a priority. You want to work current cases while the evidence is fresh, and so that's what they do. They've experienced multiple officer-involved shootings in Tennessee, and departments do not investigate shootings within their own department. That usually is done by higher authorities such as the TBI. They've been shorthanded, just like any type of business. They go through things like retirements, transfers, people changing jobs, people going to the private sector. So you get shorthanded and you just do the best you can. Now, also, there's the fact that the spring and summer months of every year are usually the times when you see the highest crime rates. Weather's warm, people are out, things happen. So you have that. There's just a lot more of a workload during the spring and summer months. There's also the search for the identification of victims of Hurricane Helene. Now, as you know, it went down through eastern Tennessee. There were lots of people that were missing, bodies that were found. They have to be identified. So the TBI has been busy there, I'm sure. So those are some of the reasons. Now, I'm often asked what it's like at a homicide investigation. Well, what I can tell you is that when a homicide occurs, the first thing you want to do is freeze the scene. You want to control everything that is there so that evidence isn't contaminated in any way. This means that only people that have business being in the crime scene, for example, technicians that are getting blood evidence or taking photographs, videotaping the scene, those people are an exception. They can get in there. But everyone else that has no business being in there should be outside the perimeter. Now, when you photograph evidence or videotape it, it needs to be done from every possible angle so that later on, if you need to re-examine the scene, you'll have it on film or on video. You also need to take measurements of each piece of evidence in relation to a fixed object, so if necessary, you can recreate the scene at a later date. That is just a common thing. You need to make sure that all of the evidence is handled properly, that it's logged in and secured properly. You also need to record and note every visible scene of trauma or wounds to the victim's body. It's very important to do. You need to canvass the area for witnesses, neighbors, people that may have been walking by, anyone that was a potential witness. You want to interview those people and get the information that they have, because you don't know which small piece of evidence may lead you to the perpetrator of a crime. You check everybody in the neighborhood, next door neighbors. You see if they have video doorbells, for instance, any outdoor cameras that might have recorded something. It's very important to do that because those cameras might pick up something that you need. Now, when you canvass a neighborhood, you're also looking for vehicles, photographing everything that you can, logging down license tag numbers so that you'll have a record of who was in the neighborhood. Maybe you might find a car that was there that shouldn't have been. You interview all the witnesses that were present. You make proper notes, you log everything, and hold on to that information. Hopefully, it will provide you with something. A lot of times those witnesses are going to give you answers, and it will cascade into other questions that you need to ask. You also interview the victim's family, friends, co-workers, anyone that has a connection to the victim. You want to see what they may know, what they may have heard, if there were marital disputes, business deals that have gone bad, so on. You want to collect all the notes that everyone working the scene has made. Everything is important. Collect those notes, you keep them, you put them aside, and you guard that information because it is so important. There's information that you discover that you don't want to get out to the public because chances are only you and the person who committed the crime knows about what that evidence might be. There is all of this that you do, and there's so much more that it would take too much time to cover. But those are the important factors. Now you need to keep in mind that there are things that can impede an investigation. For instance, funding. How much money have the taxpayers put in to support such a investigation? You run into dead ends. It happens. Sometimes that's due to a lack of evidence, a lack of witnesses, even the lack of a clear motive about why someone was murdered. There's all kinds of things that impede an investigation. Be sure and subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll get notifications of new videos when they're released. Now, how much of the information that I've previously gone over was actually done in the homicide of Pauline Pusser? I know that many of her friends and family members were never asked for their statements. Why was no autopsy performed? Was the home ever considered as a crime scene? What about BUFORD and his extramarital affairs? Did anyone ever talk to girlfriends, people that he was seeing other than just Pauline? And what about Pauline? Could that have been a motive for the murder? Was she also having extramarital affairs, or we don't know? Now, another thing is that I don't know if investigators actually inquired about their separation. As you know, Levon Plunk told me and others that they had been separated for some time. Then there was BUFORD's claim that they were getting ready to go on vacation and that their bags were packed, they were ready to go, just waiting to leave. Well, did investigators ever check to see if that was true? Were their bags actually packed and waiting at home for them to leave? Did investigators question BUFORD's deputies, his friends, to see if there was a motive for murder? Usually when a married couple, there's a homicide and one of them is the victim, you always look at the spouse. It's just a common thing to do. Was it done? We don't know. I have to wonder, did they inventory BUFORD's collection of firearms? He had a number of weapons. It would be important to know what types of weapons he had, which ones had been fired recently. All kinds of questions pertaining to the firearms comes to mind. Did they question BUFORD about the route he took that morning, the disturbance call? You know, why didn't he go down Highway 64 and 45 like we've discussed so many times before, rather than the convoluted county road system that he took to get there, which took a lot longer? And how would the ambush party know that BUFORD was going to take that particular route, understanding that 64 and 45 would have been a faster drive for him? I also wonder did they polygraph Buford? Did they take him in and polygraph him like they should? Did they check for gunshot residue on his hands when they got him to the hospital? We don't know that. Now, Jim Moffitt, Buford's chief deputy, stated several times publicly that at night he always went with Buford on calls. He said that the only 2 times he could think of that he didn't go on calls with Buford, both times, Buford got shot. Well, one of them was when Pauline was murdered. So why did he take Pauline with him on that call that night? A disturbance call can be one of the most dangerous calls that you can go on. Why take your spouse? That doesn't make sense. You know, another question I would ask is if he feared for his family, as he claimed that he did, why would he leave his children at home with neither he nor Pauline there? That has never made sense to me. If the alleged ambush took place at 4:45 and he didn't make a radio call until 6:10, that's almost an hour and a half. So what was going on during that hour and a half? Where was he and Pauline at that time? What were they doing? That is an area that I have no information on. Then there are questions about why he didn't go to the hospital in Corinth, which was much closer. Instead of driving 4 or 5 miles to Corinth, he wanted to drive about 17 miles to Selmer. And I have to wonder, is it because he did not want to cross the state line and risk the participation of the FBI becoming involved in the investigation? There are these and so many other questions that we don't have answers to. Did the TBI try to cover all those things? We don't know. For the last several years, I've used my Facebook page as a fishing hole, hoping that people would share bits and pieces of information that they know. I don't think anybody has the entire story, knows the entire story by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe that there's a lot of people that had bits and pieces of the information because they were there. They lived the story with Buford. May have only been little bits, but it's like connecting the dots. You connect enough of those, you get a better picture of what was going on. Now, having said that, look at the overall picture that they have now. There is so much that they have learned in the past 2 years that it's kind of like stepping back into the investigation. They have to look and see who is still alive that may have had a part of the story at that time. They need to re-interview those people. They have to interview people that has recently been brought to their attention. Look at any possible evidence that may have been discovered, like through the autopsy. There's so much. And you have to hope that they have been doing all that. And that is what has taken so long for them to actually close the case. Some people from the Pusser camp claim that they don't trust the TBI. I do. I think they're a professional group of investigators. I think that they really want to solve this case. It's one that they didn't have to take on, but they did. Why? Because that's their job. It's a cold case that has been on the books for 57 years now, and it needs to be closed. And there's possibly information where that they can close it. We don't know. But folks, what I'm saying, I guess, is that when you're saying, why is it taking so long? Doing a cold case investigation is often much more difficult than one that is current, because a current case has fresh information, where this one and other cold cases like it, all the information is stale. And you have to go back, start from scratch, and just look at everything again. And a lot of times that's what it takes to solve these things. So, folks, just be patient. it takes time. Sometimes you can close one of these things very quickly. Other times it takes months, even well more than a year. So we haven't reached that point yet. So just be patient, please. Thanks for being here. And remember, the truth has no agenda.